So today we're going to be looking at the Cuban Revolution, the first one, not the Castro one. We're not there yet. We still got some time to go. And then also the puppet presidents. So please do not confuse this 1933 to 34 revolution with what Castro does later on. All right. We'll get to there eventually about maybe next week. The Cuban Revolution, 1933 to 1934. So now that this new system is in place in the United States, basically he is calling all the shots in Cuba, right? Because we know about the Platt Amendment and all the politicians who are being appointed are very pro-U.S. This guy enters, Gerardo Machado. He is extremely popular in the beginning. May 1925 is when he enters, but his support starts to decline, and victory over his reelection in 1928 basically violated the promise of only having a one-term president. His victory was met with student protest. Obviously, Machado, he comes in and basically uses police brutality, right? And just starts hammering away on those students to suppress all of that. The turning point in this little revolt against Machado is when a group of officers, sounds very familiar, right? Decide to support these students and arrest their own high-ranking officers. And this movement by this army was led by this mixed-race army officer with an impoverished background. Basically, his name is Fulgencio Batista, right? And so we're going to hear a lot about Batista in the next couple of weeks. So with pressure from the U.S. government, seeing all of this turmoil and seeing like, oh my God, like what's going on, basically the U.S. pressures Machado to resign in 1933, and then Machado is replaced with this other dude named Dr. Ramon Grau. So Grau comes in and he promises this new Cuba for Cubans, right? And where basically he said, you're guys going to have democracy, you're going to get higher wages, you're going to have lower prices and stuff because everything was really expensive over there. And you're going to have voting rights for women, and, you know, any social inequalities were done. And so this new government, with the help of Batista, comes in, and those are the promise they're making. And they also end the Platt Amendment, which was a really big deal for the Cuban people, and they were very happy to see that. But not everything is perfect. So next slide, pause if you need to. These proposed changes basically worried the United States corporations because higher wages means that the corporations have to start giving up some of their wages, right? Some of the CEOs and the big elites, and they're making less profit because they have to basically spread that around a little bit. So they begin to worry, and therefore the U.S. government begins to worry. And so the United States government threatens military action because remember the Platt Amendment, but it ended, but that does not even matter. They didn't even need that at the end of the day, as this proves that, you know, the United States is like, I don't need that little piece of paper to tell me what I can and can't do. The Grau government begins to fall apart because there's a lot of internal fighting and pressure and trying to see how can they please the Cubans while at the same time trying to keep the United States happy without the United States coming in and using the military action and taking over again, right? So as a result, Grau's government got rid of the left-wing people in the government. So any leftist, any like, even if you were not a commie, anything just leans a little bit to the left, you're out. And Batista, who was the chief and armed force commander at the time, starts driving in all of these like right-wing individuals into the government and placing them in positions of power, right? This, you know, seeing this, the United States is like, oh my God, awesome. Thank you so much. We were worried there for a second. So the United States government labels the Ramon Grau presidency as a legitimate one. And anything that was promised in terms of like social and economic reforms basically dies. And that's like over with. Next slide, pause if you need to. So this renewed basically student protests, and workers began to strike because they were pissed off of the fact that this man Grau comes in and promises all these things, and it was all a lie. But Grau is no different from Machado, and Batista no different from Machado. They basically send in the police officers, and police brutality, you know, is happening at these protests, and martial law is imposed. Seeing this, people began to realize that the true power laid in the hands of Batista calling the shots, and not so much Grau. Because again, of the last slide, the right-wing individuals being placed into government, basically trying to please the United States government and sending in, you know, imposing martial law, which he's in charge of. In efforts to reduce violence, the government bribed armed gangs with positions of power, but this only increased corruption more. This only benefited Batista, though, as he was able to continue to expose the weakness of the puppet presidents like Grau and Machado last time, too, and made it easier for people to convince people that it's join him because he's the strong one and he's going to lead you and he's not weak like these other presidents, yada, yada, right? Again, sounds very familiar to Nazir. But Batista's very different from him as well. So Batista's presidency, you know, he comes in, he's able to get support from enough Cubans in Cuban society to become president. And the reason why is because he comes from very humble origins. He was poor. He grew up poor, an impoverished peasant, and he was of mixed race. So if you were of mixed race, if you weren't white in Cuba, you had no power, no political say. But this man, he's stepping in and he's like mixed. He's a person of color, right? He's half, I think he has like indigenous roots and he's like half like black, right? So this helped gain supporters from non-white Cubans, allowing him to win the presidency in 1941. His control over the military allowed him to give improved pay and conditions for non-white soldiers who supported him, and this popular support allowed him to have an easier time bribing journalists, union leaders, all of these people, and basically he convinced himself that people really loved him, but he was also buying off people. So I don't know, he's a little bit delusional in that sense. Next slide. Also the last slide. So Batista remained true to his pro-American and pro-capitalist ideologies. Not surprising because that's what he was doing under, when he overthrew Machado, and once he steps in, calling the shots behind Grau and, undermining him. He was trying to keep some of the communists happy by introducing labor laws and social reforms that would improve Cuban society. This worked temporarily because the communist supporters basically accused anybody that was opposing Batista as being fascist. So they were supporting Batista at first. It's a little confusing to think as to why, but basically, eventually, Batista's presidency started to resemble a modern corporate state where the most powerful members of Cuban society maintained monopolies. World War II was a blessing for Batista because the government started to see the Cuban government and the economy started to see a demand for sugar. That's their thing. Cuba produces a lot of sugar even to this day. It boosted Cuba's economy, and although most of the profits went to foreign corporations, the average Cuban citizen did benefit from this. But again, it was just luck because of the fact that there were so many countries demanding sugar, and Cuba had it, and therefore, they just got lucky in that sense. He got lucky in that sense. But that's it. Have a good day. See you later.